we bring in now. I was texting with him on Friday. He was listening to Buck as I was trying to get to the airport, Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. In addition to everything else going on, the biggest thing on Capitol Hill right now is the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which is trying to be passed at some point between now and Memorial Day, is understanding. You were hearing the discussion about the budget. You've been really outspoken, and I think, frankly, right, Senator Johnson, with us now from Wisconsin, about the fact that we basically are embedding the Biden budget in this new one, and the COVID spending, instead of being ratcheted back down, is now a part of the American budget going forward. But I want you to lay that out because I think it's a very cogent argument, and it's one that this audience needs to hear.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. As I said in my Wall Street Journal column, too often the reality of these budget debates get obscured in minor details, politically charged issues, and demagoguery, and that's what's going on right now. Listen, I'm a big supporter of President Trump. I could not be happier with how boldly, decisively, swiftly he's acting to honor the promises made. But the problem is, I have to be honest, the big, beautiful bill, it's just mislabeled. I would think the number one goal of any of this Republican budget reconciliation would be to not increase the deficit. That'd be the first goal. We should start bending the spending curve down. We should start reducing the projected debt. But that's not what's happening. So again, we lose sight of the big picture. We lose sight of the forest for really arguing over twigs and leaves. And so let me just kind of lay out the reality. First of all, you have to understand how the increase in spending from 2019 to this year is unprecedented, except under World War II, which, by the way, we returned to a pre-war level spending by 1948, actually below where we were from the start of the war. So it's possible if you have responsible leadership. But again, unprecedented level from $4.4 trillion, or better way to put that, $4,400 billion over $7,000 billion. That's a 58% increase in the last 6 years. Completely unprecedented. Now, I always use the analogy of a family. No family, if they had an illness and they had to borrow $50,000 to pay out those medical bills, if that family member got well, they wouldn't keep borrowing that money and spending at that level. But that's exactly what we've done. So we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to address this unprecedented level of increase in spending, and we're not doing it. We're doing the same old thing, and as you said, too, we're literally codifying what we all ran and said we're going to repeal and replace, Obamacare. We're not talking about Medicaid here. Nobody wants to reduce benefits for the disabled and the people that Medicaid was designed for. What we're addressing is how Obamacare, the Medicaid expansion for single, working age, able-bodied, childless adults, they get paid 90 cents on the dollar by the federal government, which is causing all kinds of abuse at the state level, basically state stealing from the federal government, not checking eligibility, allowing illegal immigrants to get Medicaid, putting at risk the Medicaid for those children. So, the whole SALT debate, the Green New Scam, none of these things are being addressed honestly. And if you really look at it, look at the numbers, and I look at the numbers, we will actually increase the deficit over the next 10 years, going from right now $37 trillion in debt. CBO says we'll be at 59. My guess is we'd probably increase that by about $4 trillion with the big New Deal, or the big beautiful bill. That puts us at $62 to $63 trillion. Again, you have to be honest. And by the way, I know Buck at the end of the show, or I think you might have asked me this last time, well, what are you going to cut? It's impossible to say, Medicaid, absolutely you have to go after that. But what you need is a process. And we've never had a process to control spending in the federal government. We don't have a balanced budget requirement. I didn't realize that the appropriation committees were actually established because the authorizing committees were big spenders. Well, that didn't work. The Budget Act didn't work. Simpson-Bowles didn't work. The Budget Control Act didn't work. So what I've been proposing is what DOGE has shown us how to do. You have to do the work. You have to go line by line, contract by contract, through over a couple thousand lines of the federal budget, the entire budget. And I have to believe, and having gone from $4,400 billion to $7,000 billion, that you will find hundreds of billions of dollars of spending that if you eliminate it, nobody would even notice other than the grifters who are sucking at the public trough. They're sucking down that waste, fraud, and abuse. So you got to go through that process. You have to do the work. Passing a big, beautiful bill by the end of this week. We haven't gone through the work. We're doing the same old thing, exempt almost every program, look at a few things. So that's not painful enough. Nobody even noticed that. Let's have all the savings toward the tail end of the budget period. Clap our hands and say we did a good job. No, this is completely inadequate. Understanding this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get it right. Let's take the time. And by the way, the way you do it is split it up. Just the way John Thune, the senator, always wanted to. At this point, I think whatever this House sends us, we need to skinny it up, provide the border funding, the defense funding, take a lot of the spending reductions. Use what the House did, at least 850. That was a Senate resolution. Extend the current tax law. Take an automatic tax increase off the table. Give President Trump debt ceiling relief, but not $5 trillion. Let's keep a little pressure on so we can come back, do another iteration of this, not only using the 2025 budget, but probably also the fiscal 2026 for further reconciliations. You've got to do this in multiple steps. You can't do it in one big step, because if we do that, we won't come back, and we will blow in our once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Well, Senator Johnson, appreciate you being with us as always, and I guess just there's a frustration that I think I have, and I'm sure I'm not alone here, which is that you are telling us all of this, and everything that you are saying makes sense, and certainly is along with what we have been told needs to happen numerically, mathematically. Like this is, and that's, I think, at the heart of DOGE and at the heart of a big part of what was promised with this new administration would be we're gonna tackle this and do what is necessary based on the numbers so that we don't head off of a fiscal cliff. And yet, the White House, I was watching this morning, the press conference, White House seems to love the bill, thinks it's a huge step forward, and it's fantastic. So, I have to ask, where's the disconnect here? And how is it possible you're telling us the work's not being done, the cuts aren't being made, and there's far too much of a debt increase here? Meanwhile, the White House and certainly a lot of other Republicans are saying, this is amazing, this is moving us forward. Like, where is the, just where is that disconnect? Explain to me how that's possible.
Well, it's the difference between rhetoric and reality. So the reality is the House says, we're going to cut $1.5 trillion. Sounds like a lot, but that's $150 billion. That takes us from over $7 trillion to just under $7 trillion. Okay? I know that the people that voted for Trump wanted to defeat the deep state. You don't defeat the deep state by funding it at Biden's levels. So again, the numbers just don't add up. According to CBO, we'll add $22 trillion to the debt over the next 10 years. That's $2.2 trillion per year of deficit spending, and we're going to add to that with a big, new, beautiful bill. So again, that is the reality. The other stuff is all rhetoric. Washington runs on rhetoric. That's why we're $37 trillion in debt. Again, this is the way it's always done. Package everything into some really big bill so that you force people who don't want an automatic tax increase, who don't want to see a default on the debt, to vote for something that is completely inadequate, and that's how you force it through. So you break it up. You do it in the things that we at first agree on, the border, defense, take as many spending reductions as the House has already identified, bank that. Extend the current tax law. Give President Trump a smaller increase in debt ceiling. Then you can come back. There's plenty of reasons to come back. President Trump's tax priorities, we're going to have to come back because the debt ceiling hasn't been raised for 4 years. By the way, just extending the debt ceiling into the beginning of next year will probably require something like $2.5 to $3 trillion. That ought to shock everybody. We have to stop whistling by the graveyard here.
We're talking to Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. You're a business guy. And unfortunately, there are not that many business guys in Congress in general. Certainly, almost none on the Democrat side. What do you expect to see? We're at $38 trillion national debt right now. If, as these numbers continue to go, we're talking about $100 trillion in the next generation. I don't think those are crazy numbers. The debt becomes a higher and higher part, paying interest on the debt becomes a higher and higher part, to say nothing of Social Security, Medicare, all of those things. At what point does this era of you can always keep borrowing, do we run into a wall? Are we already there? And is that one of the lessons the bond market is giving us? This is getting in the weeds a little bit, but that where it really hits people is you can't get a low rate on your mortgage, your insurance rates, your interest rates on cars, and on your credit cards. I mean, it's just not coming back down like maybe we thought it would.
Well, the fact that a dollar you held in 2019 is only worth 80 cents, that's certainly an indication of, not quite as noticeable of a debt crisis. But, I mean, the real danger is when the U.S. dollar is no longer the world's reserve currency. And the BRIC countries are trying to replace the dollar as the reserve currency. More and more global trade is being done in those currencies. And why is that important is if we're not the world's reserve currency, if we just can't keep printing money, we're all of a sudden going to be subject to global debt markets. And again, it's not a good sign that Moody's now is the third credit agency that's downgraded our credit rating. That's not a good sign. That ought to wake people up. But when that happens, all of a sudden creditors around the world go, I'll loan you some more money, but not at that interest rate. We've already got interest now exceeding $1 trillion a year, more than we spend on defense over the next 10 years, about $14 trillion just interest on the debt. Of the $89 trillion we're going to spend, $14 trillion is just on interest. It buys nothing. It's just paying off irresponsible government, basically.
Is there, I know you Senate types don't like to name names among your colleagues, especially on your own side. But Senator Johnson, as you're telling us this, you're laying this out. Are the Senate Republicans who don't care, it seems, about what you're laying out unaware of it, or do they just like to make sure all the piggies stay at the trough and it's not their problem?
So 3 years ago when we were debating an omnibus spending bill, I asked my Senate colleagues, hey, anybody know how much we spent in total last year? Nobody answered. I went out to the Washington Press Corps, asked them the same question. Somebody said, well, it's over $1 trillion. Nah, that's just discretionary spending. That's only 25% of our budget. Nobody knew because we never talk about it. Okay, we're the largest financial entity in the world. We're supposedly the 535 members of the board of directors, and nobody knew in total how much we spend. Again, we never discuss it. We only appropriate the 25% of the budget. Everything else is on automatic pilot. And by the way, that's one of the devious things the Uniparty's done. They've shifted what should be discretionary spending into other mandatory. So when I talk about, and this is something else I had to reveal, I'm providing all this information to my colleagues now. We went from $642 billion of other mandatory, not Social Security, not Medicare, not even Medicaid, from about $642 in 2019 up to about $1.3 trillion 2 years ago. It's still over $1 trillion. Now, just in that alone, you take a look at how much we've increased spending above and beyond 2019, plus up for inflation and population growth. That'd be a reasonable control, right? There's literally hundreds of billions of dollars that we've increased spending beyond that control. So that's why you have to go line by line. That's how you do it in business. You have a budget review panel. That's why I propose senators, House members, members of OMB, bring up these department heads with their budget gurus, go line by line, justify this. Why is this spending line so much more above 2019 level, plus inflation and population growth? Again, you have to do the work. DOGE has shown this. And by the way, the point being made, that has to be made, it's great. I mean, I love what DOGE has done. It's identified it, exposed it. It's also exposed how clueless and oblivious Congress is to the waste, fraud, and abuse. But how do we bank those? How do we codify it? We haven't gotten the rescission package out of this administration yet. They've talked about a $9 billion one. Apparently, that's already been tanked because we haven't got it. I mean, you have to at some point in time codify what DOGE is identifying on their website. Got turned into law. You got to end the spending, and we're not doing it.
Senator Ron Johnson, we appreciate you. You always have an open forum here with our audience. They love you. We appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you for filling us in.
Thanks for the opportunity. Take care.
For sure. I love Senator Ron Johnson because that whole discussion, Buck, I even started to smile, laugh a little bit to myself. I'm just picturing Ron Johnson being like, this is what it would be like if you were his kid and you came home and the credit card bill was not in any way defensible, right? Kid goes off to college and dad looks at the credit card bill and dad is just going line by line, just utterly disgusted. You spent this on an Uber? What, you couldn't have gotten pizza cheaper than this? Like, it is just the ultimate American dad budget analysis. And you know what? He's right about virtually everything he's saying, as your dad was often right when he was going through all your spending when you were a young knucklehead kid. If your gutters have leaves, branches, or in my case, wiffle balls, you're going to have a mess on your hands if you don't clean them out. But if you're anything like me, you're probably procrastinating, not that excited about getting up on a ladder and walking around on your roof. But a clean gutter will clear the way out for a carefree summer. Whether you're tired of unclogging your gutters or don't want an older family member getting on a ladder, it's time for a better solution. Right now, save up to 30% off at leaffilter.com/Clay and Buck. Gutter clogs aren't just a nuisance. They can cause extensive water damage. Let Leaf Filter's trusted pro help protect your home from flooding, foundation issues, and more. They'll clean out, realign, seal your gutters before installing Leaf Filter's award-winning patented technology, America's #1 gutter protection system. Schedule your free inspection. Get up to 30% off your entire purchase at leaffilter.com/Clay and Buck. That's LEAF filter.com/Clay and Buck. See the representative for warranty details.